I heard they're restructuring the whole night shift because of what happened.
Between you and me.
I think she knows who took the shipment. Listen, they're saying Johnson from down the hall is under investigation. I swear it's true. Don't tell anyone I told you.
Lena Korhewen, at only 23, wore her blue police uniform like armor. The stiff, starched fabric and polished badge added a decade of severity to her face. A face that rarely smiled. It wasn't that she lacked kindness, but life had taught her early that emotions were a liability, a weakness to be managed. Her shoulders were held straight, a permanent posture of defense, and her steps were firm, echoing with a purpose she forced into herself every morning before the sun rose. She had joined the Meridian City Police Force with a clear, simple motive. She wanted to help people. But the reality of the force was a complex machine of strange rules, long nights, and cynical colleagues who looked at her like she was a child playing dress-up. This assignment was the final stage of her training, the one meant to forge officers in fire. She had been placed at the Meridian City Maximum Security Prison, a sprawling concrete beast on the city's forgotten edge. This was not a county jail. This was where the system sent the men it wanted to forget, the ones whose crimes were so dark that even other criminals spoke of them in whispers. Lena had never stepped inside a prison before. The first day she walked through the visitor processing, her black boots shining under the harsh fluorescent lights. The first iron gate groaned open, and she stepped through. It closed behind her with a slow, heavy, resounding clang, a sound that felt profoundly final. It vibrated through the soles of her boots and settled deep in her bones, a metallic full stop at the end of a sentence. The air inside was thick. It wasn't just the institutional heat or the lack of circulation. It was heavy with something else, a dense, palpable atmosphere of regret, stale sweat, and simmering secrets. The officers at the main desk didn't look up, their faces etched with a permanent, weary boredom. "You the new girl?" one of them asked, his eyes never leaving his computer monitor. "Yes, sir, Officer Korhewen," Lena said, her voice crisp. She always said sir or ma'am, even when they didn't say it back. It was a piece of her armor. He finally looked up, his gaze lingering on her ID. Korhewen, 23. A small, cynical huff of air escaped his nose. "You sure you're ready for this place, kid? I'll do my job, sir." He shrugged, the movement indifferent. "Right. Your job today is Sector Gamma. That's where we keep the ones waiting for death." Lena's breath caught, just for a fraction of a second. She felt a cold prickle at the back of her neck, but her face remained impassive. Sector Gamma, Death Row. The words hung in the air, clinical and terrifying. She had assumed she'd be on a general population block. Not here. Not on her first day. Her throat felt tight, but she managed a single clipped word. "Understood." The sergeant Harkin slapped a thin file onto the counter. It contained only a few pages, held together by a rusty paperclip. "You're to stand post outside Unit 12. Don't talk to the prisoner unless spoken to. Don't go inside unless you have backup and a direct order. You're a statue. You got it? Just watch the door." He tapped the file. "He's 84 years old, but don't let that fool you. They say he was dangerous once." "What's his name?" Lena asked, picking up the file. "Silas Vane. Don't get too close. He's got 7 days left." 7 days. The number seemed small and immense at the same time. She looked down at the photo paper clip to the file. The face staring back at her didn't look dangerous. He looked exhausted. His skin was loose and wrinkled like old parchment. His hair a thin shock of white, like cotton wool. But his eyes, they held something. Not fear, not sadness, but a still, quiet intensity. It was the look of someone who was waiting. Lena's boots echoed as she walked down the long hallway towards Sector Gamma. This was a transition from the prison's chaotic main body to something else entirely. The distant sounds of shouting and slamming doors faded, replaced by a deep, humming silence. The air grew colder. The lights were dimmer, covered in thick wire mesh, casting long, unsettling shadows. She passed cameras that pivoted to follow her, their small red lights glowing like malevolent eyes. She passed heavy soundproof doors, each with a small rectangular slot designed for food trays, not for observation. Finally, she reached the end of the corridor. Unit 12. She stood still for a full minute, her body locking into the trained at ease stance, hands clasped tightly behind her back. She took a slow, steadying breath, tasting the dust and the metallic tang in the air. The door was solid steel, painted a dull, chipping gray. The small square opening was covered with thick bars, just large enough to see a slice of the room inside. She took one step forward and leaned in, looking through. There he was, Silas Vane. He sat on a small metal cot, his back slightly bent. His hands were resting on his knees, perfectly still. He was looking straight ahead, not at her, but at the blank gray wall opposite him, as if it were a movie screen. The room was a monochrome box. The bed, the walls, the floor, the small metal toilet in the corner, all were the same flat, hopeless shade of gray. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. She just stood there, watching the old man watch the wall. Her job. Minutes ticked by. 5, then 10. The silence was heavier than the iron gate. She could hear the faint buzz of the light fixture inside his cell, the sound of her own breathing. Finally, slowly, as if moving against a great weight, he turned his head. His eyes found hers through the slot. "You're new," he said. His voice was not the gravelly yell she had expected. It was a dry, papery rustle, like old leaves skittering across pavement, a voice that had been used sparingly for decades and had forgotten its own strength. Lena said nothing. Her training screamed at her, "Don't engage. You are a symbol, not a person." He seemed to understand her silence. "You can speak," he added, a flicker of something almost like humor in his tone. "I don't bite, not anymore." Still, she didn't reply. She just watched. He smiled, a small, weary stretching of his lips. "You're smart. The quiet ones always last longer here. The loud ones, they're always trying to prove something. They break first." Lena looked away from the slot, focusing on the wall opposite the cell. "They gave you my file, officer?" he asked. She hesitated, then gave a single sharp nod. "Then you know my name. It's only fair I know yours." "Officer Korhonen," she said, her voice flat. "Officer Korhonen, no first name." She paused. What was the rule on first names? Was it a security breach? Was it human decency? "Lena," she said, the word coming out before she could stop it. She mentally cursed herself. "Lena," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "A pretty name. A strong name. You don't look like the others. They all look tired. You look unresolved." "I'm just here to do my job," she said, defaulting to her training. "Sir," she cursed herself again for the sir. "Your job?" he asked, his eyes holding hers. "And what job is that, Officer?" Lena, watching an old man count down his days. "I'm here to follow orders." He nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. "That's what I used to say too, a long time ago." He turned away from her then, facing the gray wall once more, leaving her alone in the hallway, with his words hanging in the air. That evening, back in the staff locker room, the noise felt overwhelming after the tomb-like quiet of Sector Gamma. One of the older guards, a man named Miles, with a gut hanging over his belt, grinned at her as she packed her bag. "Heard they put you on the death watch." Still standing. "Yes, sir. You were outside Unit 12, right?" Vane. "Yes." Miles chuckled, zipping up his jacket. "Don't let that old man trick you, Korhonen. He's got a silver tongue. Had a few rookies thinking he was some kind of innocent saint. He's a sweet talker, manipulator. The worst kind." Lena paused, her hand on her locker. "What did he do?" "Killed someone with his bare hands, they say. 40 years ago. His lover. Strangled her. Then he sat down, lit a cigarette, and waited for the police like nothing happened." "Why did he do it?" she asked. Miles shrugged. "Who knows? He never confessed. never explained it. Just sat at his trial and said, "I did what had to be done. Been here ever since. Just be careful. He'll get in your head if you let him." Lena didn't reply, but that night, in her small, quiet apartment, she couldn't shake the image of the old man. She kept thinking about the way he'd said her name, about the way he looked at the wall, as if he was remembering something no one else could see. She sat on her bed, the lamp off, and stared into the darkness. 7 days. What could a man say in 7 days? What would she hear? She didn't know yet, but she knew this. She would be back at Unit 12 in the morning, and he would be waiting. Lena stood in front of Unit 12 again. It was the same hallway, the same oppressive silence, the same gray steel door, but something inside her had shifted overnight. She didn't want to admit it, not even to herself, but her thoughts had kept circling back to the old man's voice. She'd spent the night analyzing the guard's words, silver-tongued, manipulator, sweet-talker, and yet she couldn't reconcile that description with the weary exhaustion she had seen in Silas Vane's eyes.
I've seen this before.
She had meant to be a stone
Trust me,
wall,
you do not
an
want to go
impassive
down
blue
this
uniform.
path.
But now she was standing
what I
here
need to
again,
know.
10 minutes before her shift had even officially started. Her curiosity a dull ache in her chest. Through the small square opening in the metal door, she saw him. He was sitting exactly as before,
No.
on the cold steel cot, his back slightly hunched. But today his fingers were tapping gently on his knees,
Guilty.
a soft, rhythmic pat 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 against the thin cotton of his trousers, like he was counting a rhythm only he could hear. He didn't look at her, not right away. He seemed to be listening to the faint, distant clang of a gate closing far down the corridor. Then, slowly, as if he had sensed her presence all along, he turned his head. "Officer Lena," he said. His voice was the same dry rustle, but there was a new note in it. Recognition. "You're back so soon. They didn't scare you off." "I'm on duty, sir," she said plainly, her voice a little too stiff.
We know
He
you're
chuckled,
lying.
a dry,
let's try
short
this
sound that ended in a cough.
Where is she?
"You were on duty yesterday too, but now
Start
you've come
talking.
early. You're wondering.
We know you're
I can
involved,
see it.
so tell us who
You're
else was
wondering
there.
if I'm the monster they told you I am." She didn't reply. Instead, she stood straight and locked her hands behind her back, the familiar rigid posture that was her shield. She was angry with herself for being so transparent. "You sleep well?" he asked. "I don't discuss my personal life with prisoners," she said, the words sharp. He gave a slow, understanding nod. "That's a good rule. Rules keep the world from breaking apart. I used to believe in rules more than anything." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the fluorescent light. Then he added, his voice softer, "But rules don't keep hearts from breaking. That's a different thing entirely." Lena sighed, a tiny involuntary sound. She didn't move. He kept his eyes on her, his gaze not threatening, but deeply observant. "You ever been in love, Officer Lena?" "No," she said, too quickly. "And that is none of your business." "You're right," he said, not offended. "It's not." He leaned back a little against the concrete wall, and she heard the small, dry sound of his bones shifting. "I was in love once, a long, long time ago. Her name was Ilara." Lena blinked. The name was unexpected. Ilara. It sounded soft, not like the harsh angles of this place. She had a sudden, absurd image of the file in her hand. Victim E. Hayes. Ilara Hayes. She fought the urge to look down at it. She had a laugh like wind chimes, he said, his eyes going distant, focusing again on that spot on the wall that only he could see. "You ever heard wind chimes in the evening, officer? When the air is soft and the sun is almost gone and everything is quiet, that's what it was like. It made the world feel peaceful." "I've never had wind chimes," Lena said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She was a city girl, born and raised. Her soundscape was sirens and traffic, not gentle bells. Silas finally smiled. It was a real smile this time, not the cynical smirk from yesterday. It was sad, and it transformed his face, pulling the wrinkles into a map of profound loss. "Then you've never known real peace," he whispered. He looked at her again, but she knew he was seeing a different place, a different time. She used to wear this blue scarf, he continued, his voice barely audible, a bright blue, not navy blue, not the dull blue of your uniform. It was the kind of blue you only see in the sky right after a storm, when the sun finally breaks through and says hello again. She said it was her hope color. Lena stared at him, her throat dry. She wanted to walk away. Her training officer had warned her about this exact scenario. They build a connection. They make you see them as human. They use it against you. But she found her feet were rooted to the floor. Was she your wife? No, he said softly. She was supposed to be. But life has a way of turning left when you beg it to go right. What happened to her? Lena asked, her voice a little quieter now, the professional stiffness cracking. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the wall for a long, heavy minute. Lena could feel the silence pressing in on her, thick with the weight of 40 years. Then finally, he said, she died. A pause. Lena felt the cold chill from the concrete floor seep into her boots. Was it because of you? She asked, the question blunt. He looked at her now, his face calm, his eyes clear. That's what they said. That's why I'm here. She felt her stomach tighten. Did you? I didn't kill her, Lena, he said gently, but I also didn't stop the person who did. Lena didn't know what to say. The words hung between them, a confession and a denial all at once. There was a long silence. You don't believe me, he said, reading her face. I don't know you, he nodded again. Fair enough. He leaned forward, his thin hands folded between his knees. Do you believe everyone in this prison is guilty? Lena didn't answer. I used to think prison was only for bad people, he said, his voice a low monotone. But then I got here, and I saw men crying in the dark, men who couldn't sleep, men who held pictures of their children and whispered, I'm sorry over and over again when they thought no one could hear. Some people fake it, Lena said, her voice hard. They fake remorse to get a shorter sentence. Yes, Silas agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. And some people don't. Lena shifted her weight. Her boots clicked softly against the concrete. She pulled a folded newspaper from her back pocket. It was yesterday's paper, left in the break room. It was wrinkled and someone had already finished the Sudoku, but the crossword puzzle was untouched. She folded it tightly and slid it through the small food slot at the bottom of the door. Silas looked at the folded paper on the floor. He looked back up at her, his expression one of profound confusion. You look bored, Lena said, her voice gruff. Thought you might, I don't know, be bored. He reached for it slowly, his hand shaking slightly as it emerged from the cell's darkness into the hallway light. His fingers brushed the paper. No poison in this, I hope, he murmured. She almost smiled. You're not that lucky. He laughed that same dry, quiet laugh. He unfolded the page. A crossword puzzle. You trying to kill me early with confusion. He smiled. Thank you, officer. I'm not here to listen to stories, she said, trying to regain her footing. You will, he replied, his voice soft again. Whether you like it or not, when someone's about to die, their words get heavy. They don't lie anymore. There's no point. He looked down at the crossword. You think being kind is a weakness? I think being kind to a convicted murderer is pointless. She shot back. Fair enough. He leaned against the wall, the light from the small barred window high above him making his white hair glow. Tell me about your mother, he said suddenly. Lena stiffened as if she'd been struck. What? You wear your pain like a coat, he said, his voice gentle, not prying. It's heavy. It's old. I saw it yesterday. I see it now. It's in your shoulders. In the way you stand like you're bracing for a blow. I don't talk about my family. That's a shame, he said, because that's where all our stories start, isn't it? The good ones and the bad. Lena didn't reply. She turned away from the slot, her heart hammering against her ribs. He had seen her, in a way she hadn't allowed anyone to see her in years. She stayed silent, and when she didn't speak, he simply closed his eyes and began to fold the newspaper. She should have walked away. Her post was the hallway, not the slot, but she stayed, leaning against the opposite wall, lost in a memory she kept locked away. The truth was, she hadn't spoken about her mother in 9 years. Not really. Not since the accident. Not since the fire. Her mother had been a nurse, strong, smart, and brave, with a laugh that, unlike wind chimes, was loud and full and filled their tiny apartment. One night, a patient's house on the other side of town had caught fire. An old electrical fault. Her mother had just finished her shift, but she was there. She went in. She went in to save the child, trapped in the upstairs bedroom. She came out with the baby in her arms, alive and screaming, wrapped in a singed blanket. She passed the child to a firefighter, smiled, and then collapsed. She never got up. Lena was 14. People called her mother a hero. They put her name on a small plaque in the hospital lobby, but Lena never liked that word. Heroes didn't come home. Heroes died, and that made the world feel fundamentally, irreparably unfair. It was a lie, a story told to make the loss bearable. She had joined the police force, not just to help people, but because she wanted to control the chaos that had taken her mother. She wanted to enforce the rules, to create order, to stop the world from turning left when it was supposed to go right. And now she was standing here, listening to a man in a cage waiting for death, and somehow, in a way that made her angry and terrified, he understood her silence. She took a deep breath, the smell of antiseptic and old dust filling her lungs, and pushed the memory back down into its box. She looked back at the cell. Silas was watching her, his eyes full of a sad, knowing pity. "Do you know what's worse than dying, Lena?" he whispered. She shook her head, her throat too tight to speak. "Being forgotten," he said. "Or worse, being remembered for something you didn't do." She stayed quiet for a long time, the silence stretching. Finally she found her voice. "Who was he? The man you didn't stop?" Silas's smile faded. His fingers started to tremble, just slightly. He looked down at his hands. "I trusted someone I shouldn't have. A man I grew up with. A man I called my brother." He looked up, and the pain crawling behind his eyes was so raw, so ancient, that Lena had to force herself not to look away. "Ilara warned me about him. She saw what he was, but I didn't listen. I was arrogant. I was loyal to the wrong person." "What was his name?" Lena asked, her voice low. Silas Vane looked at her, and for the first time she saw the dangerous man the guards had talked about. Not a man of violence, but a man of devastating stillness. "His name," he said, his voice dropping, each word a stone falling into a deep well, "is Marcus Thorne." The day began like the others. A gray sky filtered through the high, barred windows of the prison, casting a weak, dusty light into the corridors. Lena walked her post, the rhythm of her footsteps a familiar thud, thud, thud on the concrete. But the air in Sector Gamma felt heavier today. The oppressive silence was no longer empty. It felt charged, as if it were holding its breath. She couldn't explain why. She walked slower, her boots echoing on the floor like distant, muffled drums. Her eyes were focused, but inside her mind was a whirlwind, spinning with thoughts she didn't want to admit. The name Marcus Thorne had lodged itself in her brain, a piece of shrapnel she couldn't dig out. Silas was already awake. He was sitting on his cot, back straight, his hands resting gently on his lap, not tapping. He was perfectly still. The small, barred window above him let in a single soft stream of light that touched the side of his face. He looked older today. Or perhaps, Lena thought, she was just seeing him differently. "Morning, Officer Lena," he said gently, his voice the familiar dry rustle. He didn't turn, but his stillness seemed to acknowledge her arrival. "Morning," she replied, her voice clipped. She stood at her usual place, just a few steps from the door, but she didn't cross her arms this time. She let them hang at her sides. He looked at her for a long second, then gave a small nod as if he could tell something was different about her too. "The clock is ticking," he said, not to her, but to the gray wall. 5 days,
You look a little young for this
if they
division,
stick
don't
to
you
the
think?
date. Lena didn't respond. The finality of it, the clinical countdown, made her stomach clench. "I want to ask you for something," he said, his voice steady, but with an underlying tremor she hadn't heard before. Lena's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "I know I don't have much time left," he continued, finally turning to look at her through the slot. His eyes were clear but filled with a deep, ancient pleading. "I've made my peace with it. With the dying part, I mean. I'm 84. I've lived a life even if most of it was in this box." She watched him closely, her hands automatically clasping behind her back. The guard stance, her shield. "But there's one thing I'd like before I go," he said slowly, each word carefully chosen. "Just one thing." Lena's heartbeat picked up. She didn't know why. She had a sudden sinking feeling. I don't grant favors, Vane." "I know," he said quickly. "I know, it's not a favor. He faltered, searching for the word. "It's a last request. I want to visit a grave." Lena blinked. "A grave?" "Yes," he said softly. "Hers, Alara's. It's in a small cemetery. Willow Creek Cemetery. About 2 hours from here." He nodded as if confirming it to himself. "It's been 40 years. I never said goodbye. Not properly. I never got to put flowers on her stone." Lena stared at him, stunned into silence for a moment. The sheer impossibility of the request was staggering. "You want to leave the prison?" she said, her voice incredulous. "Just for a few hours.
So let's try
I don't
this
need
again.
anything else,"
Where is
he
she?
said, leaning forward, his hands gripping
Start
his
talking.
knees. The intensity in his eyes
know
was
you're
startling.
involved, so tell
"I
us
don't
who else
care
was
about a
there."
last meal. I don't care about music. I just want to stand by her grave. Tell her I'm sorry, and then I'll come back here. I'll come back and I'll face what's waiting. I promise." She shook her head, the motion sharp, automatic. "That's not how this works, Silas. You know that. You're a death row inmate. They don't let prisoners out for a stroll, especially not 5 days before an execution." "I know," he said, his voice dropping. "But I also know people have been given last meals, last songs, even last visits with family in the infirmary. This is all I'm asking. This is different," she said, her voice firm. "And the answer is no. I can't do that." He nodded slowly, his gaze falling to the floor. "It always is." She crossed her arms now, not just to look strong, but to hold in the strange, empathetic ache that was rising in her chest. She was angry at him for asking, for putting her in this position. "Where is the grave?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I told you, Willow Creek Cemetery, a small place in the hills." She didn't write it down, but she filed the name away. Willow Creek. Silas looked down at his hands, his fingers tracing the lines on his palms. "She died alone," he whispered. "No one came. I read about it in a paper someone smuggled in here. Months later, she didn't have any family left. They just put her in the ground." Lena swallowed hard. "If you loved her that much," she said, her voice tougher than she felt, "why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you tell them about Marcus Thorne?" He looked up at her, his eyes sharp and filled with a pain that was 40 years old, but still raw. "Because the man who did it," he said, his voice cracking, "was someone I once swore to protect, and I was a coward." The words dropped like stones in the quiet hallway. "I thought protecting him was more important than clearing my name," he said, his voice thick with self-loathing. I thought Alara would understand, that she would know I didn't do it." He paused, a single tear tracing a path down his wrinkled cheek. "But she was dead. She couldn't understand, and I was wrong." Lena felt her throat tighten. She couldn't breathe. Silas leaned back again, closing his eyes, the tears still wet on his face. "I've waited 40 years to tell her I was wrong. 40 years to ask her to forgive me. I just want to say it where she can hear me." Later that afternoon, Lena stood outside the warden's office. She had spent hours pacing the corridor, Silas's words replaying in her mind. "I was a coward." She'd told herself it was pointless, that the warden would laugh in her face, but she knocked anyway. "Come in." The warden was a tall man in his late 50s, with a thick mustache and eyes like chips of stone. He looked surprised to see her. "Officer Korhonen, something wrong in Gamma?" "No, sir," Lena said, standing ramrod straight, her hands locked behind her back. "I wanted to speak to you about inmate Silas Vane, Unit 12. He raised an eyebrow. "Vane, what about him?" "He's requested a final wish, sir," Lena said, forcing the words out. "He wants to visit a grave before his execution." The warden stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then he barked a short, harsh laugh. "Visit a grave? Is this a joke, officer?" "No, sir. Absolutely not," the warden said, waving his hand dismissively. "That man doesn't leave this facility under any circumstance, except in a coroner's van. That's final." "I understand that, sir. But..." "No buts, Korhonen." He stood up now, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. He was a foot taller than her, and he used it to loom. "If we start granting that kind of sentimental wish, we'll have every other con on death row asking for a road trip to Disneyland. This is a prison, not a charity. This is different, sir." "Why?" he snapped. "Because he's old? Because he's polite? They're all different, officer. And they're all here for a reason. You're new here. You don't get to decide what matters. Your job is to guard the prisoner, not to be his friend, not to feel sorry for him. Do you understand me?"
lying.
Lena clenched her
let's try
jaw,
this again.
the muscle ticking.
Where is
"Yes,
she?"
sir." Dismissed. That evening she
Start
stood
talking.
outside Unit 12. The
you're
fluorescent lights
involved, so
hummed.
tell us who else
Silas
was there.
looked up the moment she appeared, his eyes searching her face. "I take it. The answer was no," he said. She nodded slowly. "They won't let you out." He wasn't surprised. He didn't even look disappointed. He just sighed a long, rattling exhale that seemed to empty him. "I didn't expect them to say yes." Lena frowned. "Then why ask me? Why put me through that?" "Because," he said, looking at her with a new sad intensity, "I had to try. And because you're the only person who has looked at me like I'm still a man in 40 years." She leaned against the wall, crossing her arms, the defeat from the warden's office still bitter in her mouth. Her voice was low now. "Why does it matter so much? After all this time, you've been in here for 4 decades. Why is saying it at her grave so important now?" He looked at her, his face calm, but his eyes full of something deep and turbulent. "Because I broke her heart before he ever laid a hand on her," he said. "And I never said I was sorry. You told me that already." "No," he said softly. "You think I did, but I haven't told you everything. You want to know what happened? You want to know why I'm a coward?" Lena stayed silent, her body rigid. "The man who hurt her. Marcus, he was my best friend. We grew up together. We were like brothers. I trusted him with my life." He looked down at his trembling hands. "And when Alara started to pull away from me, I blamed myself. I thought maybe she'd stopped loving me. But I was wrong." Lena's heart was racing now, a slow, heavy drumbeat. She found out what he was doing. Silas whispered. He was stealing, skimming money from the Veterans Fund where he worked. Alara found the ledgers. She threatened to expose him. She came to me, begging me to see the truth. But I didn't want to listen. I called her jealous. I called her a liar. I defended him. I chose him over her. His voice dropped so low, Lena had to lean closer to the slot to hear him. "The night she died, I went to her apartment to apologize. I'd been thinking all day. What she said, it started to make sense. I went there to tell her she was right, to beg her to forgive me." He paused, his eyes closing, reliving it. "The door was unlocked. I called her name. The air was wrong. It was cold. A lamp was on the floor. And her blue scarf, her hope color, it was on the floor by the sofa." He was breathing faster now, short, shallow breaths. "And then I saw her. I found her. I was the one who found her body." He was weeping now, silent tears streaming down his
look a little
face.
young for
"I
this
held
position,
her.
don't you think?"
I tried. I knew she was gone. And instead of calling the police and telling them the truth, I just sat there. And when they finally arrived, someone else must have called. I told them I didn't know anything. I kept the secret. I didn't say his name." "Why?" Lena whispered, the word torn from her. He looked up at her, his eyes broken and wet. "Because I was a coward. Because if I told the truth, they would have arrested Marcus. And in that one moment, I wasn't ready to lose two people in one day. My best friend and the woman I loved. I thought silence would keep me safe, that it would just go away. He shook his head, a violent trembling motion. But silence is a prison too, Lena. And I've been in this one. He tapped his chest. A lot longer than I've been in this cell. He leaned back again, exhausted, as if the confession had taken his last ounce of strength. I just want to say her name out loud, in front of her grave. I want to tell her, I'm sorry I didn't believe her. And then I can go. Lena stood there, frozen, for a long time. The hallway was silent. She could hear her own heart pounding in her ears. Then, without a word, she turned around and walked away. Lena did not sleep. She couldn't. She sat in her small, sterile apartment, the one she kept meticulously clean, and watched the blue-white light of a passing patrol car slide across her wall. The silence of her own home felt loud, accusatory. Silas Vane's words echoed in the quiet, playing over and over in her mind like a broken record. I was a coward. I found her. I kept the secret. Silence is a prison, too. His confession hadn't felt like a manipulation. It hadn't been the silver-tongued trick the guards had warned her about. It had been the raw, agonizing sound of a man breaking apart, of a soul emptying itself of a 40-year-old's poison. She contrasted that raw pain with the warden's cold, dismissive laugh. Absolutely not. This is a prison, not a charity. She felt a familiar hot anger rise in her chest. It was the same anger she'd felt 9 years ago, standing in the cold drizzle at her mother's funeral. The world had called her mother a hero, but the system had failed her. An investigation later found that the building's owner had ignored multiple fire code violations. He paid a fine. Lena got a folded flag. It was a trade that had felt and still felt fundamentally unjust. Now she felt that same imbalance. The system was about to kill a man who, at the very least, was not guilty of the crime they'd pinned on him, while the real killer, Marcus Thorne, had walked free for 4 decades. She sat on her sofa, her food from dinner untouched on the coffee table. She couldn't ignore this. If she did, she was no better than the warden. She was no better than Silas himself. With a sudden, decisive movement, Lena stood up and walked to her laptop. She turned it on, the screen casting a bright glow in the dark room. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She didn't know what she was looking for. Not really. Answers, a breadcrumb, anything. First, she searched for Willow Creek Cemetery. It was real, a tiny rural place hidden in the rolling hills 2 hours north of Meridian City. It was old, poorly maintained, and mostly forgotten. There were no professional photos, no website, just a location pin and a few blurry images from a local hobbyist blog. Then, her heart hammering, she searched again. Alara Hayes obituary 1983. At first, nothing, just a few broken links. She refined the search, adding Meridian City. Still nothing. Frustration began to build. She tried again, this time searching the online archives of the old Meridian City Herald. The site was clunky. The search functioned slow. She typed in the name and the year. A single result popped up. A scanned image from a microfiche file. She clicked it. The image was grainy. The text was faded, slightly blurred at the edges, but it was there. She leaned in, her eyes scanning the words. Evelyn Marie Hayes, age 42, passed away in her home late Sunday night. A dedicated teacher at Meridian Elementary and a lifelong resident of Green Hollow, Alara was known for her quiet strength and her devotion to children in need. She leaves behind no immediate family. A small service will be held at Willow Creek. Lena read the standard, polite phrases, and then her eyes locked onto the final line of the short article. Cause of death was ruled unknown at press time. An investigation is ongoing. Lena sat back, her chair creaking in the silence. She read the line again and again. Unknown at press time. A cold chill ran down her spine. How could the cause of death be unknown? If, as the prison guards believed, Silas had been found with his hands around her throat, how could a man be arrested, tried, and convicted of murder? A conviction so solid it led to a death sentence. If the initial public report listed the cause as undetermined, this wasn't just an inconsistency. This was a gaping, impossible void. It meant the story told in the prison was a lie. It meant the trial must have been a lie. This changed everything. This wasn't just a man's regret, it was a conspiracy. The next morning, Lena showed up to work 2 hours early, but she didn't go to Sector Gamma. She went straight to the prison's central records room in the administration building. It was a cold, windowless room that smelled of old paper dust and floor wax. She used her badge and a fabricated excuse. "I'm studying protocols for long-term high-risk inmates for my training review," to gain access. The clerk, a woman who looked as tired as the files she managed, buzzed her in without a second glance. Lena walked to the V section of the archaic filing cabinets.
you're lying.
She pulled open the
let's try
heavy
this
drawer. Vane,
Where is
Silas. Case 4817. The file was thin,
We know you're
shockingly
involved, so
thin.
tell us who else
For a
was there.
man who had been incarcerated for 40 years on a capital murder charge, it should have been thick with appeals, psychological evaluations, and incident reports. She opened it. Inside there were only 3 documents. One was his original 1983 arrest warrant. One was a typed single-page document that looked like a confession, signed by Silas Vane. And the last was his transfer form to death row. That was it. Lena's hands began to shake. Where was the forensic report? Where was the autopsy? Where were the witness statements? Where was the trial transcript? There was nothing. Nothing about Alara Hayes. Nothing about the crime scene. Nothing about a Marcus Thorne. How could a man be sent to die with no real evidence in his file? She picked up the transfer form again, her fingers tracing the official stamp. She flipped it over. On the back, scribbled in pencil, were the words "Case files sealed by judicial order, IEV." Lena's blood ran cold. She knew those initials. Every officer in this prison knew them. Captain Ares Volkov, the man who had run the death row unit with an iron fist for 30 years before retiring 5 years ago. He was a legend, strict, loyal to the system, and feared by both inmates and junior officers alike. He had been the one to sign off on Silas's transfer. He had been the one to seal the file. Lena snapped the folder shut, her mind racing. If she couldn't get the records, she would get the truth from the source. She waited until her shift ended. She didn't go to her post. She called in sick, a risk that made her stomach turn. But she knew she had no choice. She drove to a small, neat house on the edge of town, a place she'd found after a quick search of retired prison staff. She knocked on the door. An old man answered. He was bald with sharp, suspicious eyes that hadn't lost their intensity. He was holding a pipe. "Captain Volkov?" she asked, her voice steady. "Used to be," he grunted, his eyes looking her up and down. "My name is Officer Lena Korhonen. I'm with Meridian City Police, stationed at the prison." He stepped back slightly, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" "I'm looking into an old case, from 1983, Silas Vane." The man's face tightened, all the color draining from it. "That case is closed." He started to shut the door. "I know," Lena said, putting her hand flat on the wood, "but I need to ask you why you sealed it." He froze. He stared at her,
You
his
look a little
eyes
young for
boring
this
into
division, don't
hers,
you think?
searching. He saw the same lack of fear, the same unresolved fire that Silas had seen. He sighed, a long, heavy sound, and opened the door. "Get in." The house smelled like dust, old books and pipe tobacco. He sat in a worn leather chair and motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing. "You're a fool, child," he said, not unkindly. "You don't know what you're stirring up. A man is going to die in 4 days for a crime I don't think he committed," Lena said. "And what makes you so sure?" "His file is empty, Captain. No autopsy, no forensics. And the original newspaper obituary listed the cause of death as unknown. How does that happen?" Volkov took a long drag from his pipe and looked away, staring at a collection of old photos on his mantle. Because it was messy, he said, his voice low. The press was sniffing around. Ilara Hayes. She had connections. And the man she was accusing, the man Vane was protecting, he was protected. By who? Volkov gave her a long, hard look. By people who don't like being exposed. By money. By power. Joseph Barker. Lena flinched. The name was wrong. You mean Marcus Thorne? Volkov's head snapped back to her, his eyes wide. He told you the name, he whispered. My God. After 40 years he finally said the name. He shook his head. Yes, Marcus Thorne. He was untouchable. So you knew. Lena's hands curled into fists. You knew he was innocent. I suspected. Volkov corrected, his voice sharp. We didn't have cameras, no body mics, just word against word. Thorne had an alibi from his wife. Vane confessed. He signed the paper. What were we supposed to do? When the wrong people have the right power, you keep your mouth shut, officer. You learn that, or you don't last long. So an innocent man went to prison. Vane was never fully innocent. Volkov said, standing up. He kept quiet too. He protected Thorne. Even when it cost him his life, he made his choice. That doesn't mean he should die for it. But he made it. Volkov stared at her, a long, appraising look. You remind me of someone, he said. Your eyes that fire. You're not going to let this go, are you? No, he sighed again, a sound of deep, ancient weariness. He walked to a locked wooden cabinet in the corner, pulled a small key from his pocket, and opened it. He reached to the very back and pulled out a small black metal box. He opened it and handed her a single yellowed folded envelope. This was my personal copy, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I wasn't supposed to keep it. I don't even know why I did. Maybe I was waiting for someone like you to come asking. Lena's hands were trembling as she took it. She didn't open it. Not there. She nodded, her throat tight. Thank you. She walked back to her car, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break her ribs. She sat in the driver's seat, and with shaking fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, brittle with age. It was a handwritten statement. The writing was shaky, terrified. I was there. I saw him leave. Marcus. He was running from her house. He had blood on his shirt. He saw me watching from the window. I went over. Ilara was already gone. He said if I ever said a word, he'd kill me too. I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. Lena stared at the initials. Nenti Nave Thorne. Marcus Thorne's wife. The alibi. Lena felt the air leave her lungs. This was it. This was the proof. This was the truth that Eris Volkov had buried for 40 years. This was the key. The next morning, Lena sat at her small kitchen table. The sun was rising, casting a pale, indifferent light across her apartment. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night staring at the yellowed, brittle piece of paper, reading Naomi Thorne's terrified words until the faded blue ink was seared into her memory. I saw him leave. He had blood on his shirt. He said he'd kill me too. This was it. This was the key. This was the truth that had been buried for 40 years. A truth that had rotted in a dark box while an innocent man rotted in a cell. Her anger from the night before had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. She showered, the hot water doing nothing to warm the chill in her bones. She put on her uniform, her movements precise, automatic. She strapped on her duty belt, the familiar weight a strange comfort. But today she wasn't just an officer. She was a witness. She drove to the prison, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She didn't go to Sector Gamma. She didn't go to the locker room. She walked straight into the main administration building, the one with carpets and polished wood, the one that smelled of coffee and bureaucracy. She walked directly to the warden's executive assistant. I need an immediate meeting with the warden and the prison board,
Trust me, you do
Lena
not
said,
want to go down
her
this
voice
path.
flat, devoid of any
Tell me what I need to
insubordination,
know.
but equally devoid of deference. The assistant, a woman who had worked there for 20 years, looked up in surprise. Officer Korhanen, The board is in a budget meeting. You can't just,
No.
It's a matter of imminent prisoner execution, Lena said, cutting her off. It involves new exculpatory evidence in the Silas Vane case. If they proceed without seeing this, they will be executing an innocent man. The assistant's eyes widened. The words executing an innocent man were a grenade. She picked up her phone. Warden, I have Officer Korhonen here. She's claiming, yes, sir. She says it's urgent. Regarding the Vane execution. A pause, yes, sir. She hung up. They will see you. In the boardroom now. The boardroom door was two thick slabs of dark mahogany. It was designed to be imposing, to make anyone who entered feel small. Lena pushed it open.
We know
The
you're
room
lying.
was long.
So let's
A
try this
polished
again.
table reflected the
Where is
overhead
she?
lights. 3 high-ranking officials,
Start
2
talking.
men and a woman in dark suits,
We know
the
you're
prison
involved,
board,
so tell us
sat
who
at the
else was
far
there.
end. The warden stood beside them, his arms crossed, his face a mask of thunderous rage. Officer Korhonen, the warden snapped, his voice dangerously low. You are interrupting a state-level meeting. This had better be the most important thing you have ever said in your life. Lena walked forward, her boots silent on the thick carpet. She stopped at the end of the table. She felt their eyes on her, cold, annoyed, skeptical. Sirs, ma'am,
Did you
she
really
began,
think that would
her
work,
voice
officer?
clear and strong,
You amuse
resonating in the
me.
quiet room.
I've seen
I
this
am here
before.
regarding inmate
Trust me,
Silas
you do
Vane,
not want to go down
Unit
this
12.
path.
His execution is
Tell me
scheduled
what I
in
need to
4
know.
days. I have uncovered
Please, sir, I
evidence
beg
that
you.
proves his conviction
There
was a
must be
gross
something you
miscarriage
can
of
do.
justice. One of the
I
board
can't
members,
die in here.
a man with thin silver hair, scoffed. Officer, we get a dozen wrongful conviction claims a week. What makes this different? This, Lena said. She unzipped her portfolio. She didn't present Naomi's letter first. She started with the foundation. First, this is a copy of the original newspaper obituary for the victim, Ilara Hayes. The cause of death is listed as unknown, not strangulation. Unknown. She slid the paper down the polished table. The woman on the board picked it up and frowned. Second, Lena continued. This is a log of the official prison file for inmate Vane. It is empty. There is no autopsy report. There are no forensic reports. There are no witness statements. The only document is a signed confession and a transfer sheet. The case file itself, sir, was sealed by former Captain Eris Volkov, who I believe knew the conviction was tainted. The warden's face darkened. You're accusing a decorated captain of a cover-up. I am stating facts, sir, Lena said, her eyes locked on his. And finally, this. She took the original, brittle letter from its protective sleeve and placed it on the table. This is a handwritten statement from Naomi Thorne, the wife of Marcus Thorne, the woman who provided his alibi. It was written the day after the murder. She gave it to Captain Volkov, who then buried it. The boardroom was dead silent. The silver-haired man picked up the letter. He read it. His eyebrows shot up. He passed it to the woman. She read it, and a small gasp escaped her. She passed it to the third man, who read it and simply stared at Lena. What is this? The woman asked, her voice sharp. Where did you get this? It was given to me by
Korhonen.
Captain Volkov himself,
You look a
Lena
little
said,
young for this
deciding to
division,
use
don't
the
you
truth
think?
as her weapon. He kept it for 40 years, afraid to come forward. He confirmed Marcus Thorne was the real killer and that he was protected. The warden slammed his open palm on the table, the sound making Lena jump. This is inadmissible. This is insanity. A 40-year-old unverified note from a retired officer, a newspaper clipping. You are building a fantasy, Korhonen. Sir, it is the truth, Lena insisted, her voice rising. The silver-haired man, the legalist, pushed the letter away as if it were contaminated. Officer, what you have here is nothing. It's a piece of paper with no chain of custody. It's hearsay
seen this
upon
before.
hearsay. It would be
Trust me,
thrown
you do
out of
not
any
want to go
court
down
in
this
10
path.
seconds. What we do
Tell
have
me
is
what
a
I need to
signed
know.
confession from Silas Vane himself, a confession likely coerced to protect his friend. Lena shot back, a confession that was worthless, which is why they had to seal the real file. The woman on the
No.
board held up her hand. Officer, let's for one moment assume this story is true. Do you have any
Guilty.
idea what you are asking us to do? To halt a state-sanctioned execution based on this, the precedent would be catastrophic. The entire system would grind to a halt. We would be inundated. Is that worse than killing an innocent man? Lena asked, her voice low and dangerous. That's enough. The warden roared. He pointed a thick finger at her. You have been warned, officer. You were warned about this inmate. You have become emotionally entangled. You have violated protocol, conducted an unauthorized investigation, and now you are standing here, accusing your superior officers
know you're
and this
lying.
very board of
So let's
what?
try this again.
Murder? I am accusing
is
you
she?
of ignoring the truth, Lena said, her
Start
hands
talking.
balling into fists. I am
We know
asking
you're
you to
involved,
delay
so
the
tell us who else was
execution.
there.
That's all. Give his lawyer. Give me time to find Naomi Thorne. Let her testify. The warden shook his head, a look of final, profound disgust on his face. This meeting is over. The execution will proceed as scheduled, and you, Officer Korhanen, are a disgrace. He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her. You are officially suspended, pending a full investigation into your conduct, which I assure you will result in your
really think that would
termination.
work,
Hand
officer?
over your badge
You
and your ID.
amuse me.
Now, the room
I've seen
fell
this before.
silent. The three
Trust
board
me, you
members
do not want to
watched,
go down
their
this path.
faces impassive. They had
Tell
made
me
their
what I need to
decision.
know.
The system was protecting
Please, sir,
itself.
I beg you.
Lena stared at the warden.
must be
Her
something
chest
you
felt
can do.
hollow. She had
I
failed.
can't
She had
die
brought
in
them the
here.
truth. A woman's terrified words from 40 years ago, and they had brushed it aside like dust. Slowly, her hands trembling not with fear, but with a white-hot, consuming rage, she reached for the badge pinned to her chest. She unclipped it. She felt the weight of it in her palm. It was heavy. It was supposed to mean something. It was supposed to mean justice, protection, truth. It meant nothing. It was just a piece of metal. She looked the warden dead in the eye and opened her hand. The badge dropped onto the polished table with a loud, definitive clack that echoed in the silence. She then unclipped her ID from her belt and dropped it on top of the badge. You're wrong, she whispered. Get out of my prison. The warden said, his voice a low growl. Lena turned, her back straight, and walked out of the boardroom. She didn't look back. She walked through the administration building, past the assistant who was staring at her with wide, fearful eyes. She walked out the main doors, into the bright, cold sunlight of the parking lot. She got into her car and sat there, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She was shaking. The rage was so profound it made her dizzy. She had done everything right. She had followed the rules. She had respected the chain of command. She had found the proof, and they had laughed at her. They had called her emotional. They had dismissed the truth because it was inconvenient. She thought of her mother. The system had failed her. The building owner paid a fine. Her mother was in the ground. She thought of Silas. The system was failing him. Marcus Thorne lived free. Silas was going to be strapped to a gurney and poisoned. And for what? For rules, for precedent, for protecting the system. In that moment, sitting in her car, stripped of her badge and her job,
Korhanen.
something inside Lena Korhanen
You look a
broke,
little young
or
for this
perhaps
division,
it
don't
was
you think?
finally forged. The rules were the problem. The rules were the real prison. The warden and the board, they weren't protectors of justice. They were just high-ranking prison guards, protecting the walls of their own institution. A cold, clear, and terrifying certainty settled over her. If the system wouldn't bend, she would break it. She had tried the right way. She had tried the official way. Now she would try her way. Her eyes drifted to the prison's main sally port, then to the high chain-link fences topped with razor wire. She knew the blind spots. She knew the guard rotations. She knew which cameras had a 3-second lag. She knew where the transport
this
van
before.
keys were kept.
Trust me,
Silas
you
had
do not
one
want to
last
go down this
request,
path.
to see a grave. A
Tell me what I
desperate,
need to know.
illegal, and righteous plan began to form in her mind. They had taken her badge, but they hadn't taken her knowledge. They hadn't taken her anger, and they hadn't taken her keys. Not all of them. She started the
Yeah.
car. She wasn't just a suspended officer anymore. She was the only person who could save him, and the clock was ticking.
Guilty.
It was 12:43 a.m. The darkness was absolute, the kind that felt heavy and suffocating. There was no moon, just a high, cold blanket of clouds that swallowed the starlight. Lena Korhonen sat in her car, parked in a muddy, forgotten maintenance lot, half a mile from the prison's rear perimeter. She was no longer an officer. Her uniform was at home, folded in a drawer. She wore black jeans, a black long-sleeved shirt, and dark, soft-soled boots. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, functional knot. On the passenger seat sat a small, high-fidelity audio recorder.
So let's try this again.
Its battery full,
Where is
its
she?
memory empty and waiting. She looked at the clock on the
Start talking.
dashboard. 12:44
We know you're
a.m.
involved, so
Her
tell us
heart
who
was
else
not
there.
pounding. It was doing something worse. It was beating with a slow, heavy, powerful thud, a cold, methodical rhythm of adrenaline and irreversible decision. She had already tried the right way. She had presented the truth, and the system had spat it back in her face. Now there was only this. She picked up the recorder, then set it back down. Her entire life she had been defined by rules. Her mother had died a hero, and Lena had responded by building a fortress of regulations around herself. Follow the rules, and the chaos can't get in. It had been her mantra. It had been her shield, and it had been a lie. Silence is a prison too. She took a long, slow breath, tasting the stale air in her car. She thought of Silas, alone in his cell, with only 4 days left. She thought of Alara, alone in the ground for 40 years. The warden had taken her badge. He had not taken her knowledge. She knew the patrol schedules. She knew Officer Davies in the West Tower always took his midnight break 10 minutes early. She knew the camera on the rear service gate had a 3-second loop delay. And she knew the master key to the maintenance tunnels, which she had forgotten to turn in with her badge and ID, was heavy in her pocket. It was time. She got out of the car. The night air was cold and damp, smelling of wet earth and distant diesel fumes. She moved silently, melting into the shadows cast by the perimeter fence. She didn't run. She moved with a steady, unhurried pace, just another shadow in a world full of them. She reached the rear service gate, a tall chain-link fence, topped with razor wire. But the gate itself, used by delivery trucks and garbage disposal, was secured by a heavy-duty padlock on a chain, and next to it, a small metal door for personnel. Lena pulled the key from her pocket. Her hand did not shake. She slid the key into the lock. The click of the tumblers turning sounded impossibly loud in the silence. She winced, freezing, listening. Nothing. Just the wind rustling the high grass outside the fence line. She opened the door just wide enough to slip through and closed it gently behind her. She was inside. She was on prison grounds, illegally, as a trespasser. She was in the service corridor, a concrete tunnel lit by dim yellow emergency lights, spaced 50 feet apart. It smelled of bleach, mildew, and something old and metallic. This was the prison's underbelly, the place no visitors ever saw. Her boots made almost no sound on the gritty concrete. She moved past the rumbling industrial boilers, past the laundry facilities,
young for
now
this division,
silent
don't
and
you
dark, their huge steel drums glinting like open mouths. She knew this route. She had studied the blueprints for weeks, under the guise of training familiarization. Her internal clock was ticking. Davies would be back at his post in 12 minutes. She had to be in and out of this section before then. She reached the junction that led up to the main cell blocks. She paused in the deep shadow of a stairwell, listening. Far above, she heard a muffled shout, then a heavy door slamming. The sounds of the prison's restless, caged life. But here it was quiet. She took the stairs 2 at a time, moving up into the heart of the beast. She emerged into a B-block hallway, dark and silent. All inmates were locked down. She was now in the main building. Her heart beat faster. This was the most dangerous part. She moved along the wall, keeping to the shadows. She passed the empty glass-enclosed guard station. A single monitor glowed, cycling through camera feeds. She counted. 1, 2, 3. She passed the doorway during the 3-second lag, a ghost in the machine. Finally, she reached the heavy soundproof door that led to Sector Gamma. She used the key again. The lock was heavier, more complex. She held her breath, applying steady pressure. The mechanism opened with a soft, oily snick. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. And then, Silence. Absolute tomb-like silence. The air was colder here. The distant hum of the prison was gone. She was alone in the corridor of the dead. She walked the final 100 feet. Her footsteps, which had been silent before, now seemed to echo. Thud, thud, thud. A drum beat announcing her arrival. She reached Unit 12. She stood outside it for a moment, her hand trembling for the first time. This was it. The point of no return. She was no longer just breaking rules. She was committing a felony, aiding an escape, kidnapping a prisoner. Her career wasn't just over. Her life as she knew it was over. She stepped up to the slot and looked through. Silas was not on his cot. He was on his knees, his forehead pressed against the cold concrete floor, his back shaking in a silent, desperate prayer. Lena's resolve hardened into something unbreakable. She pulled the master key again. She slid it into the heavy lock on the cell door. This was a sound she had never heard. The sound of an execution cell being opened without authorization. The lock made a loud, heavy thunk clang. Silas Vane's head snapped up. He scrambled back against the far wall, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't see an ally. He saw the dark shape of a person opening his cell door in the middle of the night. He thought his time was up, that they were coming for him early. Silas, Lena whispered, pulling the heavy door open. He froze. He squinted through the darkness. Lena, officer, don't talk, she said quickly, stepping inside. The air in the cell was stale, thick with the smell of fear and unwashed linen. Just get up, we're leaving. What's happening? He stammered, his voice thick with sleep and terror. He was confused. Is it time? No. She grabbed his thin arm, pulling him to his feet. He was lighter than she expected, frail, a collection of bird-like bones. I'm breaking every rule in the book, she whispered, her voice fierce. I'm getting you out of here, but you have to be quiet. You have to do exactly what I say. Let's go, before someone sees. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't protest. He just nodded, his eyes fixed on her, a dawning, terrified hope in them. He grabbed the only thing he owned, the folded crossword puzzle she had given him, and shoved it into his pocket. She pulled him into the hallway. Stay close. Don't make a sound. The journey back was a nightmare. Silas was weak. His knees wobbled. He was breathing heavily, a rattling sound in his chest. Lena practically carried him, her arm around his waist, his thin arm draped over her shoulders. They reached the stairwell to the service tunnels. We have to go down, she whispered. He looked at the steep steps, and she saw despair in his eyes. I can't, my legs. Yes, you can, she commanded, her voice low and hard. One step at a time. I've got you. They descended, each step in agony. Silas winced, his joints grinding. Halfway down, he stumbled. He cried out, a small, sharp gasp of pain. Lena froze, her hand clapped over his mouth, her other arm holding him up. They stood in the stairwell, plunged in darkness. Above them, a door opened. A bright beam from a flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping the upper landing. Who's there? A voice called out. It was Davies, back from his break. Lena's heart stopped. She held Silas against the wall, pressing them both into the shadows. She could feel the old man's body trembling violently against hers. She didn't breathe. The beam of light swept the landing again. It hit the top step, illuminating the dust, but went no further. Damn rats, Davies muttered. The door slammed shut. His footsteps faded. Lena waited for a full minute, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard, she was afraid it would be heard. Slowly she took her hand away from Silas's mouth. He was gasping, on the verge of panic. It's okay, she whispered, her own voice shaking. We're okay, we have to go, now. She half dragged, half carried him the rest of the way. Through the tunnels, past the silent laundry, back to the rear service door. She eased it open, scanned the perimeter, and pulled him through into the cold night air. The muddy lot was 50 yards away. It felt like a mile. Silas was collapsing, his strength gone. Almost there. Stay with me, Silas. Stay with me. She got him to the car, fumbling with the lock. She opened the back door and helped him in, guiding him onto the seat. He fell onto it, breathing in ragged, wheezing gasps. She ran to the driver's side, jumped in, and slammed the door. Her hands were shaking so badly, she dropped the keys. "Damn it," she hissed. She scooped them up, jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over, the sound deafeningly loud. She didn't turn on the headlights. Using only the faint glow from the dashboard, she put the car in gear and rolled slowly, silently out of the maintenance lot. She didn't turn on the lights until she was half a mile away and had merged onto the empty sleeping highway. The prison van, a vehicle she'd signed out for maintenance 2 days ago, and stashed rolled down the empty highway like a shadow. Silas sat in the back seat, his hands shaking. He wore a clean old shirt. Lena had brought it in her bag. It had been her father's, a plain gray button-up, slightly loose, but it looked warm. Lena drove in silence, her eyes glued to the road, her rearview mirror. No lights, no sirens, not yet. Finally, Silas spoke. His voice was a thin, trembling whisper. I dreamed of this, he said, staring out the window at the trees, rushing past in the dark. I dreamed of this every night for 40 years, but I never thought, don't talk. Lena said, her voice tight, her eyes on the road. Not yet. She pressed her foot harder on the gas. The city lights faded behind them. Ahead, the road stretched into pitch black, leading north to the hills, leading to Willow Creek. It was 1:52 a.m. The prison van, its headlights off, rolled slowly onto the gravel path of the Willow Creek Cemetery. The sound of the tires crunching on the stones was the only sound, loud and abrasive in the dead of night silence. The gate, as Lena had seen in the online photos, was a low wrought iron fence, its black paint flaking, its latch secured by nothing but a simple loop of rusted wire. No one was around. There were no houses for miles, no streetlights, just the dark rolling hills and the silhouettes of ancient weeping willow trees stirring in the cold wind. Lena put the van in park and killed the engine. The sudden total silence that followed was immense. She got out first, her senses on high alert, scanning the darkness. The air was cold and damp, smelling of wet leaves, turned earth, and the faint, sweet scent of decay. Nothing moved. She opened the back door. "We're here." Silas emerged slowly, wincing as his feet touched the uneven ground. His knees were weak from the ride and the shock, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the rows of dark stones, wide awake for the first time in 4 decades. He looked around, breathing in the free, cold air in short, sharp gasps. I can't believe it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We don't have long," Lena said, her voice low and urgent. She helped him stand, and he leaned on her heavily. "Where is it? Do you know where?" "Plot 27B, he whispered. The number a prayer he had memorized, she said. The paper said it was near the north wall, by the big willow. He pointed a shaking finger toward a massive dark shape at the far end of the cemetery. Lena nodded. She held his arm, and they began to walk. It was a slow, agonizing procession. The ground was soft and uneven, hiding dips and roots. Silas stumbled twice, and each time Lena caught him, her own muscles straining. The only light came from the small, weak flashlight on her keychain, which she kept pointed at the ground just in front of their feet, creating a tiny, moving circle of illumination. They moved between the rows of forgotten stones, some tilted, some broken, all of them cold to the touch. The wind hissed through the high branches of the trees, a long, mournful sound. Then Silas stopped. He pulled his arm from her grasp. "There," he breathed. He didn't wait. He let go of her and stumbled forward the last few feet. Lena watched him. He was walking toward a small, flat headstone, barely visible, half covered by overgrown grass and dead leaves. It was set almost directly under the massive, sweeping branches of the willow tree. He reached the grave. Plot 27B. He didn't fall to his knees right away. He just stood over it, his body swaying, his hands clenched at his sides. He was staring at the name, carved into the cold, weathered granite. Lena followed a few steps behind. She
Where
stood
is
in the
she?
shadow of the tree, giving him space.
Start
Then,
talking.
quietly, her movements
We
deliberate,
know you're involved,
she
so
pulled
tell
the
us who
small
else was
black
there.
audio recorder from her pocket. She held it in her left hand, her thumb resting on the red button. Silas dropped to his knees. The sound of his clothes brushing the wet grass was loud. His hands, gnarled and trembling, reached out. He touched the cold stone, his fingers tracing the letters of the name he hadn't dared to say aloud in years. Ilara Marie Hayes. Ilara, he whispered. The name was a ragged tear in the silence. I'm here. Lena pressed the button. A tiny red light glowed, no bigger than a pinprick. She held the recorder steady, her arm braced against her side. Silas kept his eyes on the headstone. He seemed to have forgotten Lena was there. He was alone with his past. You always said I was stubborn, he said quietly, his voice thick. You said I was a fool for loyalty. You were right. You were always right. He paused, his shoulders beginning to shake, his voice cracked. I thought I could protect you. I thought by staying silent I was doing the right thing. I thought it was the price I had to pay. For what I did, for what I didn't do. His hands shook violently now, pressing flat against the damp earth next to the stone. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I failed you, Ilara. I failed you. Lena stepped 1 foot closer, holding the recorder out just slightly, capturing every broken syllable. The wind rustled and a few dead leaves skittered across the gravel path. They called you nosy, he said, a small wet laugh catching in his throat. Remember? You were a teacher. You saw everything. You saw the numbers that didn't add up. You saw the way he looked at money. You saw the darkness in him. And I called you jealous. I called you crazy. I defended him. I chose him over you. He placed both palms flat on the gravestone, as if he could push his words, his warmth, into the cold granite. I should have spoken up. I should have named him. The night I found you. He was weeping openly now, his body bowing forward until his forehead rested on the stone. The air was so cold in the apartment. I knew, the moment I opened the door, I knew. The lamp was on the floor, and your blue scarf, your hope scarf, it was on the floor by the sofa. And I knew, he was reliving it, his voice a low, horrified moan. I let fear win. I let loyalty blind me. I let my oldest friend get away with, he choked on the word. He couldn't say it. Tell the world, Lena said, her voice
You look a
soft
little
but
young for
firm,
this division,
cutting
don't you
through his
think?
grief. Tell her, Silas. Tell her the truth. Now, he turned, his eyes red and wild in the faint light. He looked at Lena, then at the recorder she was holding. He understood, this wasn't just for him. This was for the world. This was his one final statement. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked back at the grave, and his voice, when it came, was no longer just the voice of a grieving old man. It was the voice of a witness, clear, cold, and final. My name is Silas Vane, he said, speaking directly to the recorder. I have been in prison for 40 years for a crime I did not commit. I'm here at her grave, Ilara Hayes, the woman I loved. He paused, gathering his strength. I didn't kill her. I found her, but I didn't kill her. Who did? Lena prompted, her voice quiet. Silas looked up, not at the grave, but at the darkness between the trees, as if he could see the man's face.
Now.
His voice dropped, filled with 40 years of contained, ice-cold rage. Marcus Thorne, he said,
Guilty.
the name exploding into the night. Marcus Thorne killed her. He stole money from a veterans fund. Ilara found out. She confronted him. She was going to expose him. And so he silenced her. He went to her apartment and he killed her. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. It was out. It was on tape. I knew it. Silas continued, his voice breaking again, the anger replaced by the crushing weight of his confession. I knew it that night. I saw the look on his face. I knew what he was, but I let fear win. I let my loyalty to a monster blind me. I kept his
We know
secret,
you're lying.
and they arrested
So
me,
let's try this
and I
again.
let them. I
Where is she?
thought I was protecting. I don't know what I was
Start
protecting.
talking.
I lost you, and then I
We know
lost
you're
myself.
involved, so tell
I
us who
failed
else
you,
was there.
Ilara. He looked up at the sky, which was just beginning to turn from pitch black to a deep, bruised purple in the east. The first hint of dawn. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I was a coward, but I'm not a coward anymore." He collapsed then, his strength gone, falling sideways onto the wet grass, his hand still resting on the base of the headstone. He was weeping deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Lena stepped forward and pressed the stop button. The small red light blinked, then went dark. She put the recorder back in her pocket, the small device feeling impossibly heavy, a solid weight of truth. She knelt beside him. She didn't say anything. She just placed her hand on his shaking shoulder. They stayed like that for a long time. The wind brushed through the trees. The grass rustled. The first birds began to sing, hesitant, in the distance. The sky in the east was now a pale grayish pink. Finally, Silas's sobs quieted. He was exhausted. He looked at Lena, his eyes clear. "Thank you," he whispered. Lena picked up the recorder and helped him to his feet. He was frail, but his back seemed straighter, as if the 40-year-old weight had finally been lifted. "Let's go," she said softly. "Before the world wakes up." The drive back was quiet, but it was a different quiet. The tension was gone, replaced by a strange, exhausted peace. Silas leaned against the passenger window, his eyes closed. He looked like he was asleep. Lena held the steering wheel tight, her jaw clenched. The red light of dawn was now on the horizon, painting the clouds in streaks of orange and gold. She had it. She had the confession. She had the truth. She knew what she had to do next. No more asking. No more waiting. She would leak the tape. Let the world hear. Let them judge for themselves. The prison van rolled back onto the highway. It was 4:14 a.m. The eastern sky was no longer a deep, bruised purple. It was a sick, pale gray, the color of ash. The coming dawn was a ticking clock, an enemy. Lena drove, her eyes burning from exhaustion, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Beside her, Silas was quiet, leaning his head against the glass. He wasn't asleep, but he was somewhere else, lost in the memory of the cold earth and the name he had finally spoken. The return was even more tense than the escape. Every distant headlight in her rear-view mirror was a siren. Every shadow on the side of the road was a police cruiser, but no one came. The world was still asleep, unaware that the truth of a 40-year-old murder was sitting on a digital recorder in her pocket. She slipped the van back into the maintenance lot, its engine clicking in the cold air. She helped Silas out. He was moving slower now, the adrenaline gone, leaving only a profound, bone-deep weariness. He leaned on her, his breathing shallow. "We're almost there, Silas," she whispered, her own voice hoarse. "Just a little more." They retraced their steps, a pair of ghosts moving backward through the prison's underbelly, the service tunnels, the dark, silent stairwell, the long, terrifying walk past the guard station, counting the 3-second lag of the camera. Finally, the heavy, soundproof door to Sector Gamma. She opened the door to Unit 12. The cell was just as they had left it, cold, gray, and empty.
Now.
It felt wrong to be putting him back, like forcing a bird back into its cage after it had tasted the sky. He walked in and sat heavily on the cot. He didn't look defeated. He looked finished. His back was straighter. The fear that had lived in his eyes for 4 decades was gone, replaced by a deep, exhausted peace. "If they find out," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp, "I won't say a word about you. I'll tell them I escaped on my own." Lena shook her head. "It won't matter." She reached into the bag she had carried, the one that had held her father's shirt. She pulled out a small folded napkin. Inside was a simple oatmeal cookie. She had grabbed it from her own kitchen,
We know you're
an
lying.
afterthought,
So let's
a
try this
small
again.
human impulse.
Where is she?
She handed it to him. He looked at it, then at
Start
her,
talking.
and a small, genuine
We know
smile
you're
touched his
involved,
lips.
So tell us who else
He
was
took
there.
it. "You're breaking too many rules, Officer Lena." "I'm not done yet," she said. She backed out of the cell. She looked at him one last time, the old man holding a cookie in the gray dawn light of his cell. Then she pulled the heavy steel door shut. The lock engaged with a loud, final, echoing clang. She turned and walked away, not looking back. She was out of the prison, the sun just beginning to creep over the horizon. By 5:30 a.m., she drove not to her apartment, but to a 24-hour diner on the industrial side of town. The open sign was a buzzing neon pink lie. Inside, it smelled of stale coffee, grease, and disinfectant. She slid into a cracked vinyl booth in the back corner, her face turned away from the door. A tired waitress poured her a cup of black coffee that tasted like burnt chemicals. Lena just held the warm mug, her hands trembling so badly she was afraid she would drop it. She pulled out her laptop. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She plugged the audio recorder into the USB port. The device was small, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She found the file, rec-001.wave. She opened a new, anonymous email account, her fingers fumbling on the keys. She created a message. She didn't have a list of journalists, not a real one. She just started typing in the email addresses for every major news desk in the country she could think of. tips@meridianherald.com, breaking@channel3news.com, news tips@nationalpress.com. She typed a subject line, Truth from Sector Gamma, the dying confession of Silas Vane. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like a fist inside her chest. This was it. The escape had been a felony. This was an insurrection. This was an attack on the entire system she had sworn to uphold. She wrote a short, simple message. This is the voice of a man scheduled to be executed in 3 days for a crime he did not commit. He has been in prison for 40 years. This audio was recorded less than 2 hours ago. Listen to his words. His name is Silas Vane. The man who killed Alara Hayes is Marcus Thorne. Do not let the state execute an innocent man. She attached the audio file. The progress bar crawled. Uploading, upload complete. Her finger hovered over the send button. This was the true point of no return. She thought of her mother. She thought of the warden's cold, dismissive laugh. She thought of Silas's face when he saw the gravestone. She clicked the button. The email was gone. She sat back in the booth, her breath catching in her throat. For a full minute, nothing happened. The diner was quiet. The coffee in her cup was cold. She stared at her laptop, her entire life condensed into that one message sent notification. Her phone sitting on the sticky table buzzed. She jumped, nearly knocking over the mug. A new message. A number she didn't recognize. She opened it. Is this real? Did a death row inmate just confess to being innocent on tape? Who is this? Before she could reply, her phone buzzed again.
I've seen this
and
before.
again. An email,
me, you do not
then
want to
another.
go down this
A
path.
text. We are verifying
Tell me what I
this.
need to know.
This is Channel 3 News. We're airing the audio at 7 a.m. Need confirmation ASAP. This sounds like a man ready to die, but not guilty. Who recorded this? This is the Meridian Herald. We are running this. We need to know the source. Then 10 more. 20. Journalists, bloggers, a human rights lawyer, even a retired judge. Her phone began to vibrate continuously on the table, a frantic buzzing dance. It was out. The fire was lit. Lena stood up, threw a $10 bill on the table, and walked out of the diner just as the clock hit 7 a.m. The prison, she heard later, was in chaos. By 8 a.m., every officer, every administrator, every inmate knew the clip had gone viral. The world had heard Silas Vane's broken, clear voice. Marcus Thorne killed her. I knew it that night, but I let fear win. People were angry, curious, shocked. The warden, as she had expected, was furious. But he wasn't just furious. He was cornered. Lena was walking down the street, just trying to breathe, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She answered it, her voice wary. Hello, is this Miss Lena Coronin? The voice was female, sharp, intelligent, and fast. Who is this? My name is Elena Rios. I'm a senior attorney with the National Innocence Project. I've just been forwarded an audio file that it has completely shaken my entire office. I've listened to it 3 times. I've already pulled the public record on Silas Vane's case. It's thin. In fact, it's non-existent. I heard the name Marcus Thorne. I believe this is real. I need you to tell me if you are the source. Lena stopped walking. Yes, she said. It's real. I was there. She heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. My God, you're a police officer. I was suspended yesterday for trying to bring this to the warden. Good, Elena Rios said, her voice electric. That makes you a credible, unimpeachable witness. Listen to me, Miss Coronin. You have done something incredibly brave and incredibly illegal, and I am going to back you up. I am filing an emergency stay of execution with the state Supreme Court right now, citing new evidence and prosecutorial misconduct from the original 1983 case. I need a sworn affidavit from you by noon. Can you do that? Yes, Lena said, a wave of relief so powerful it made her knees weak. An ally. A real one. I'm on my way. By midday, the area outside the prison was a circus. News vans had their satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Protesters were gathering, their numbers growing by the hour. They held handwritten signs. Review the case. Justice for Silas Vane. Innocent until proven guilty. Who is Marcus Thorne? Lena stood across the street, in plain clothes, her face hidden by a baseball cap. She watched the chaos she had created. She saw people holding up signs with a grainy 40-year-old photo of Silas. It was surreal. She had no job, no badge, no protection. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel lost. She felt right. Her eyes scanned the crowd. She saw the angry faces, the curious faces, the reporters speaking into cameras. And then her eyes landed on one man. He was standing at the back of the crowd, near a large oak tree, leaning heavily on a cane. He was old, in his late 70s, wearing an expensive black overcoat that looked out of place. His face was tight with worry and a dark, simmering anger. He wasn't chanting. He was just watching the prison gates. Lena felt her stomach twist. She knew that face. She had searched for it. A single old business photo from a 1990s article about the Veterans Fund. Joseph, Marcus Thorne. Still alive, still free, and still hiding. He hadn't seen her. Not yet. Lena began to move. She didn't push. She just slipped through the crowd. Her eyes locked on him. She was 20 feet away, then 10. He turned his head, perhaps sensing her stare. Their eyes met, a spark of recognition. He didn't know who she was. Not really. But he saw the look in her eyes. The look of someone who knew. She said his name. Her voice clear and loud enough for him to hear over the din. Joseph Barker, Marcus Thorne. He froze, his face already pale, turned the color of ash. A few people nearby turned to look at her, then at him. You know what you did, Lena said. It wasn't a question.
No.
His face tightened into a snarl. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, his voice a low hiss.
Guilty.
He began to back away, his cane tapping frantically on the pavement. Then let's talk about it in court, she said, taking another step toward him. You're just a kid, he hissed, his eyes filled with venom. You don't know anything. You don't know how the world works. I know when it's broken, Lena said, her voice cold. He glared at her, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Then he turned and pushed violently through the crowd, disappearing behind a news van. Lena let him go. She didn't follow. She didn't need to. He was no longer a ghost. He was real. And now he was running.
We know you're
The courtroom
lying.
was packed.
So let's try
It
this
was a
again.
suffocating, vibrating
Where is
beast
she?
of human anxiety. A tinderbox of
Start
whispers,
talking.
coughs, and the frantic, quiet
We know you're
clicking of
involved, so
reporters'
tell us who else was
laptops.
there.
The air was thick with the smell of old wood polish, damp wool coats from the crowd, and the sharp, metallic tang of institutional floor wax. Every seat was taken. People stood 3 deep against the back wall, their necks craned, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity, anger, and anticipation. Lena stood among them. She was a civilian here, her badge and uniform gone, replaced by simple black trousers and a gray sweater. She felt exposed, powerless. Her entire desperate, illegal gambit had come down to this. A formal room, a set of rules, and a judge she had never seen. She scanned the crowd, her heart hammering. She saw the warden near the front, his face a mask of thunderous, contained rage. She saw Elena Rios, the lawyer at the defense table, shuffling papers with a calm, focused energy. And then she saw Silas. He was wheeled in through a side door, flanked by two guards who looked profoundly uncomfortable. He was no longer in his prison grays. He wore a simple, ill-fitting dark suit, donated by the Innocence Project, that hung loosely on his frail, bird-like frame. He looked pale, terrified, his eyes wide as he took in the sea of faces, the high ceilings, the flags. This bright, loud, fast world was a sensory assault after 40 years of gray silence. His eyes searched the crowd, found Lena in the back and held her gaze. She gave him a single, small, sharp nod. He closed his eyes for a second, taking a breath. "All rise," a bailiff shouted. The entire room scraped to its feet as one. The sound was like a wave crashing. A tired-looking man with a shock of gray hair and thick glasses entered and settled himself at the high bench. He looked annoyed by the media circus, but his eyes were sharp. He banged his gavel, the sharp crack cutting through the noise. "This emergency hearing is now in session," the judge said, his voice a low rumble. "The matter before us is an emergency petition for a stay of execution and a motion to dismiss. In the case of the state versus Silas Vane, I have read the motion. I have seen the unorthodox exhibits. Miss Rios, you have the floor, and this had better be good." Elena Rios stood, her voice clear and carrying, with no microphone. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today because we believe, we know, that a terrible, catastrophic mistake was made 40 years ago. A mistake that the state is poised to finalize with a lethal injection in less than 48 hours. She paused, letting the words hang. "The state's original case against Mr. Vane, Your Honor, was built on nothing. No forensics, no autopsy, no credible witnesses. It was built on a single coerced confession from a man grieving the woman he loved, a man we will show, who was actively protecting the real killer. For 40 years, Mr. Vane has maintained his silence. Until 2 days ago." She gestured to the audio file sitting on the clerk's desk. "The world has heard his confession. But today we have something more. We have the proof. The defense calls one witness, Your Honor. We call Miss Naomi Thorne."
Tell me what I need to know.
A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Lena felt her own breath catch. She came. She actually came. The warden's head snapped around, his eyes wide with genuine shock. He had assumed this was a bluff. "Call your witness," the judge said, leaning forward. His interest clearly piqued. The courtroom doors at the back opened. A woman entered. She was tall, thin, with white hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her hands, clutching a small, worn handbag, trembled violently, but her face, though pale and terrified, was set with a final, brittle resolve. This was Naomi Thorne. She walked the long aisle toward the witness stand. The only sound in the room was the click-clack of her sensible heels on the marble floor. It was the loudest sound Lena had ever heard. It was the sound of truth, 40 years late, finally arriving. She reached the stand. A clerk met her with a Bible. She placed her trembling left hand on it and raised her right. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God." Naomi looked at the judge, then at Silas. Her voice was a thin, reedy whisper, but it was clear. "I do." She sat. Elena Rios approached her gently. "Ma'am, please state your name for the court." "Naomi Thorne." "I was Naomi Barker." "Thank you, Miss Thorne. Are you the former wife of Marcus Thorne, also known as Joseph Barker?" "Yes," she whispered. "Ma'am, I need you to speak up for the court." "Yes," she said, louder this time. I divorced him in 1985. I haven't seen him in 38 years. Miss
Trust
Thorne,
me, you
I
do
want
not
to
want
take
to
you
go
back
down
to
this
the night
path.
of April 19th,
me what I need to
1983.
know.
The night Ilara Hayes was murdered. Can you tell the court where you were? Naomi's eyes closed. She was breathing quickly, her knuckles white on the railing of the stand. This was it. The moment she had fled a country to avoid. I was at home, she said, her voice shaking. We lived 2 blocks from Ilara. Marcus, he and Silas, they were friends. I knew Ilara. She was kind. What happened that night, Miss Thorne? There was yelling, she said, the words tumbling out now, as if a dam had broken. Marcus, he had been drinking. He was angry. Ilara had found out. She found out about the money he was stealing from the Veterans Fund. She had told Silas, but Silas didn't believe her. She told Marcus she was going to the police. He got quiet, a terrible cold quiet. He said, I'll handle it, and he left. He left the house. Elena asked. Yes, he was gone for maybe an hour. And when he came back, Naomi's voice broke. She stopped weeping silently. The judge waited. When he came back, she continued, pulling a tissue from her purse. He came in through the back door. I was in the kitchen. I saw him. He had blood on his shirt, on the cuff, a lot of it, and his hand. His knuckles were bruised. The courtroom was dead silent. Lena felt she couldn't breathe. What did you say? Elena asked gently. I asked him, what did you do? He just looked at me. His eyes, I'll never forget his eyes. He said, she won't be a problem anymore. And then he grabbed me. He told me that if I ever said a word, if I ever told anyone what I saw, he would do the same to me, and then he'd find my sister. She was sobbing now, so I did what he said. The next day the police came. I lied. I told them he was with me all night. I was his alibi. And then they arrested Silas. And I stayed quiet. I was a coward. I ran. I took my sister and we left the country. I lived in Canada. I never came back until I saw the news. I heard his voice. Silas is on the audio. And I knew I couldn't let him die for what my husband did. Elena Rios nodded, her own eyes wet. She turned to the judge. The defense rests, Your Honor. The judge looked at the state prosecutor. The man who had been listening with a growing horrified look on his face stood slowly. He looked at Naomi. He looked at his own thin file. He looked at the warden. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, his voice flat. The state has no reason to believe this witness is lying.
Before.
Her testimony
Trust
is
me, you do not
corroborated
want to
by
go
the
down
private
this path.
statement given to Captain Volkov.
Tell me what I need to know.
And by the audio recording now in the public record. In light of this profound and deeply disturbing new testimony, the state will not oppose the defense's motion to dismiss the original conviction.
No.
The judge leaned back in his chair. He looked at Naomi, who was still crying silently. Then he looked at Silas. He looked at him for a long time. Mr. Vaughn, the judge said, his voice gentle now. You have sat here today and heard this. Do you have anything you wish to say before I make my ruling? Silas Vaughn struggled. With the help of the guard next to him, he slowly, painfully pulled himself to his feet. He gripped the edge of the table, his body trembling with weakness, with emotion, with the sheer weight of the moment. The room held its breath. He looked around at the faces, at the judge. Then he turned and looked, not at Lena, but at the empty space where Ilara should have been. I've waited 40 years for this day,
So let's try
he
this
said,
again.
his voice a
Where is
hoarse,
she?
rattling whisper. I didn't kill her, Your Honor.
Start
I
talking.
failed her. I was a coward,
We know
and I
you're
failed
involved,
her,
so tell
but
us
I
who
did
else
not
was
kill
there.
her. His knees buckled. The guard helped him sit down again. The judge cleared his throat. His own eyes looked red. He picked up his gavel. In that case, he said, his voice thick, this court finds that there has been a profound, fundamental, and horrifying miscarriage of justice. The conviction against Mr. Silas Vaughn is hereby overturned. All charges are dismissed. This court recognizes his innocence. Effective immediately.
Did you really
Mr.
think
Vaughn
that would
is
work,
no
officer?
longer a prisoner of
You
the state.
amuse
He is a
me.
free man.
I've
He
seen this
banged the
before.
gavel. The room
Trust me, you do
exploded.
not want to
It
go
wasn't
down this
just
path.
noise. It was a physical
Tell me
force
what I need to
explosion
know.
of shouts, of cheers,
Please, sir, I
of
beg
sobs,
you.
of cameras
There must
flashing
be
like
something you
1,000
can
strobe
do.
lights. Lena didn't realize she was crying until she felt the hot tears on her own cheeks. She stood frozen, the noise washing over her, through the chaos, through the reporters rushing the barrier, through the guards trying to maintain order. She saw Silas. He had turned in his wheelchair. He was looking across the entire room, his eyes finding hers. He smiled, a small, soft, tired, and thankful smile. Lena smiled back, her own face breaking, the tears coming freely. It was over. He was free. The courtroom exploded. The sound was a physical thing, a wave of shouts, sobs, and flashbulbs that seemed to suck the air from the room. Reporters surged forward, a chaotic tide of bodies, microphones, and cameras, all screaming questions. Silas, what will you do now? Lena, do you feel responsible for this? Mr. Vane, how does it feel? Lena moved through the chaos, her body acting on pure protective instinct. She pushed through the barrier, ignoring the shouts of the bailiffs, and got to Silas's side. Elena Rios was already there, holding up a hand against the press. Silas himself looked overwhelmed, his hands clapped over his ears, his eyes wide with the shock of the noise, the lights, the sheer volume of the world. He looked up at Lena, his face pale and terrified. "Please," he whispered, his voice lost in the din. I need to see the sky. Please, Lena. Somewhere quiet. I've got him," Lena said to Elena, who nodded, her face grim. "I'll handle the press." Lena grabbed the handles of the wheelchair. "We're leaving," she said, her voice the old familiar tone of an officer, cutting through the noise around them. She pushed him through the swarming crowd, shielding his body with her own, toward a side exit. They burst through the doors into a back hallway, the sounds of the courtroom finally muffled behind the heavy wood. She didn't take him to a safe house. She didn't take him to a hospital. She pushed him out to her car, helped him into the passenger seat, and drove. She drove away from the city, away from the concrete and the noise, toward the only place she could think of that felt like peace. They drove to a small grassy hill just outside the city limits, a place her mother used to take her to watch the clouds when she was a little girl. She parked the car at the base, and they sat in the silence. The only sound was the wind moving through the tall, dry grass. Finally, Silas looked at the wide, unbroken, pale blue sky. "The clouds," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. They look different."
No.
Lena smiled softly, her first real smile in days. "They're the same clouds, Silas." "No," he said, his eyes tracing the path of a hawk circling high above. "They're brighter now. They're not cut into little squares by a window and bars." They sat in silence for a long time. Lena leaned her head back against the seat, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. She looked at the old man beside her. He was free, but she had broken every law, every rule, every part of the code she had sworn to uphold. She had committed multiple felonies. But he's free, she thought, her eyes closing. "I broke the law, but I upheld justice." She realized, in that quiet moment on the hill, that the two were not the same thing. The badge, the uniform, the rules, they were just tools. They weren't the point. The point was the truth. The point was the woman buried in the cold ground at Willow Creek, and the man who was finally, after 40 years, able to breathe free air in her name. "Do you think she knows?" Silas asked, his voice quiet. "Do you think Elara knows?" Lena turned to him. "Yes," she said. "I think she knew even before all this. I think she was just waiting for us to catch up." Silas nodded, a slow, tired motion. He closed his eyes, his body leaned slightly against the car door, his strength fading. "I'm tired, Lena," he whispered, but he was smiling. "I'm so very tired, but I'm not sad, not anymore. Let's get you somewhere warm," she said, her voice thick. Later that night, Elena Rios had him admitted not to a hospital, but to a private, quiet hospice center. The doctors, arranged by the Innocence Project, had been clear. 40 years in a concrete box, combined with his advanced age and the profound shock of the last few days, had taken their toll. His body was failing, but he was not a prisoner. The hospice room was the antithesis of his cell. The walls were a pale, warm yellow. The bed was soft, piled with clean cotton sheets and thick blankets, not a thin, stained mattress on a steel slab. The light came from a warm lamp in the corner, not a buzzing, flickering fluorescent tube. And the window was huge, a single clear pane of glass that looked out onto a small garden where birds were feeding. The air smelled of soap and sunlight. Lena sat in a comfortable cushioned chair beside the bed. Silas was asleep, his breathing shallow but peaceful. For the first time in his adult life, he was sleeping without the sound of distant yelling or slamming steel doors. A nurse stepped in gently, her shoes silent on the carpet. "He's still resting," she whispered, a kind smile on her face. "He hasn't eaten much, but he keeps asking for you every time he wakes up. He seems to think you'll disappear." "I'm not going anywhere," Lena said, her voice quiet. The nurse gave her a warm look, then stepped out. 2 hours later, as the sun began to set, painting the garden in colors of orange and purple, Silas stirred. His eyes fluttered open. He blinked slowly, adjusting to the soft light. He turned his head and saw her. "You're still here," he whispered. Lena stood and leaned closer, taking his thin, papery hand in hers. It was cold. "Of course I am." He gave a soft, weak smile. "Good." He looked at the window, at the colors in the sky. "Beautiful." "Yes, it is." He turned back to her, his eyes clear and calm. "I'm ready now, Lena." Lena didn't speak. She just squeezed his hand, her throat tightening. For all those years, I thought I would be afraid," he said, his voice a dry rustle. "But I'm not anymore. You gave me that. You gave me peace." She felt tears pushing behind her eyes, hot and sharp, but she held them back. "You gave it to yourself, Silas. You told the truth." He smiled again. Will you do two things for me?" he asked. "Anything," she whispered.
Tell me what
"When
I
I'm
need to know."
gone, bury me next to her. At Willow Creek, I want to be next to her. Will you do that?" Lena nodded, a tear escaping and rolling down her cheek. "I promise." And this with a visible effort.
No.
He reached to the small bedside table, where a single worn folded envelope sat. His fingers fumbled, and Lena helped him, picking it up. It was addressed with a single word, "Alara." "Give this to her," he said, his breathing becoming shallow. Put it on her stone. It's the letter, the one I've been writing in my head for 40 years. Lena took the envelope. It was surprisingly heavy, thick with paper. "I will," she said, her voice breaking. "I promise, Silas." He nodded, a final small movement. He took a slow breath, then another. His eyes began to close. "Lena." "Yes, thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for listening." She gripped his hand tighter. "I'm honored you trusted me." His hand relaxed in hers. His breathing slowed. Then, as the last bit of orange sunlight faded from the garden outside, it simply stopped. A long, profound silence filled the room. Lena didn't move. She sat there, still holding his hand. As the room grew dark, outside, the birds had stopped singing. The world was quiet. She sat with him, a free man, for a long, long time. The funeral was held 5 days later. It was simple, small, just as he would have wanted. There was no media, just Lena, a visibly emotional Elena Rios, and standing at a respectful distance under a tree, the old retired Captain Eris Volkov, his hat held in his hands. Lena stood by the graveside. The wind moved through the willow trees, the same sound she had heard that night, but now it sounded like a sigh, not a hiss. A new headstone had been placed beside Alara's. It read Silas Vane, 1939 to 2025. He found his voice. Lena placed a single white rose on the fresh soil. Then she took the worn, thick envelope from her coat pocket. She knelt, just as he had, and placed it gently on Alara's headstone. "I think you already know," she said quietly to the stone, "but he loved you. He never ever stopped." Weeks passed. The story of Silas Vane and the rogue officer who saved him spread. Then, as all stories do, it faded into the background of the world's noise. Marcus Thorne was arrested. His trial was set. The system, prodded and shocked, began the slow grinding work of correcting itself. Lena was in her apartment, packing. She assumed, going to be charged. Her career was over. She was at peace with it. Her phone rang. It was the commissioner, Officer Coronin, he said, his voice deep and formal. "Sir," she replied, bracing herself. "Your actions," he said, "were unprecedented. They were, I must state for the record, in profound violation of department policy, and frankly, highly illegal." "Yes, sir, I understand. They also," the commissioner continued, his voice changing, "resulted in the single most important wrongful conviction reversal in this state's history. The public, for some reason, thinks you're a hero. The Board of Ethics thinks you're a dangerous liability. I think you're what we've been missing." Lena was silent. "We'd like to reinstate you, Coronin. If you'll have us, your suspension is lifted, but not on the street, not at the prison. I have a new assignment for you." A few days later, Lena stood in a brightly lit classroom at the Meridian City Police
You look a little
Academy.
young for this
She wore
division,
her
don't you
crisp
think?
blue uniform again, the badge pinned to her chest. It felt different now. Not like armor, not like a shield, just like a tool. She stood in front of a class of new recruits. They were young, their faces eager, nervous, and full of the same certainty she once had. They were all staring at her. They knew exactly who she was. "My name," Lena began, her voice clear and strong, "is Officer Coronin. I'm your new training instructor." The room was silent. "Some of you joined because you want to stop crime," she said, walking slowly between the desks. "Some of you joined because you want justice. You've been taught that justice is about the law, that it's about the rules, that it's about the chain of command. I'm here to tell you that's not always true." She stopped at the front of the room. "What I've learned is that justice doesn't always scream. It doesn't always announce itself. Most of the time, justice whispers. It's a whisper in a prison cell," she continued, her voice low and intense. "It's a name in a 40-year-old file. It's the moment your gut tells you that something is wrong, even when the whole world and all your superiors tell you that it's right. Your job, your real job, isn't just to enforce the rules, it's to protect the truth, even when the rules, and the people who write them, are the ones in the way." A hand went up in the front row. A young, eager recruit. "Ma'am, did you ever doubt yourself when you know?" Lena paused, a small sad smile touching her lips. "Yes," she said, "every single step of the way." "Then, how did you keep going?" She looked at the recruit, but she saw silence.
you're lying.
"Because I learned
So
that
let's try this
silence is
again.
a prison too,"
Where
she
is she?
said softly. "And I was done being a prisoner.
Start
Your
talking.
job is to listen. Start
We
with
know
the
you're
silence,
involved, so
and
tell
then
us who
listen
else was
harder."
there.
Class dismissed.